Welcome back, everyone. This is your boy Q. I'm back with another video in my Kali Purple Sock in a Box deployment series of videos. If you're liking this content, please feel free to hit the like button, and also subscribe to my channel. It would greatly appreciate it. Any links that I will actually reference in this video or this series, they will be linked in the description below at the bottom of the screen, right below the video. In this video, what I will be doing is going over some of the differences between the, the instructions that are provided by offensive security or the Kali Purple community on how to deploy the sock in the box solution. The differences between what they wrote and then what instructions I will actually be following, what I've developed, I should say. To start with, I have the Kali Purple. These are the instructions that are provided from the Kali Purple community. This main page here is their wiki. If you do a Google search for Kali Purple Sock in a Box, you may see a couple of links, but if you see a link that says it brings you to GitLab, that's where I'm at here. And if it doesn't take you directly to this page, you can, on the left side, you'll see plan, and then you can click on wiki, and it'll bring you to this page here. But in the beginning, it kind of goes over what is Kali Purple, what was what kind of led the offensive security folks to develop this version of Kali Linux, this distribution, and it kind of gives you a detailed. I think one of the things I'm looking at here, it mentions a lot of things about. There are some tools included here, uh, as far as Kali Purple itself. These tools aren't actually included in Kali Purple. You install them using the instructions that they have, but they're not included. But that aside, um, it's a very good tool, if you will, new thing to play with, incorporating blue team tools as well. Keeps all the red team stuff in there, but it also employs blue team tools, more on the security side of the house. Um, to go to the recap from the last video, I have a diagram here, or this is not my diagram. This is actually included in the Kali Purple instructions of what this enclave, this sock in a box, is actually going to look like when you actually finish deploying it. At least a logical view. Last video, I went into detail of each of these individual virtual machines. There's 6 of them. As a reminder, I'm only deploying 4. I'm deploying this firewall up here, and I'm deploying these 3 virtual machines here. Um, one of the things that I did bring up, or I may have brought up, but one of the things I want to point out right quick is that each of these virtual machines, these 3 here, Kali Violet, Kali Purple, Kali Eminence, they all look like they're connected to their own network. And then the firewall has an interface on each one of them, as well as an interface for the LAN, as well as an interface for the WAN and DMZ. It's not exactly the case. So what I will actually show you real quick is that this is I put this together to kind of show you actually what the connections look like. In a nutshell, you have your firewall connected to a WAN, it's connected to a DMZ, and it's connected to a LAN, specifically a LAN. I do have lines here directly having connections between each one of these virtual machines here, but this pink box, that's the virtual network that is connected to. Single interface connected to this LAN. Each one of these guys have a single interface connected to this same LAN. They just have, this is where microsegmentation comes in. They just have there's network configuration set up to where there is they're using a /31 address or subnet for each one of them, a different one. So for those who are familiar with subnetting, if you have a /31, it's about 4 IPs that are usually 4 sequential IPs that are in that group. And of those 4, the low IP, let's just say, for example, I have Kali Violet here. I have 192.168.253.7. Well, .5 that would include .5, .6, .7, and .8. Well, .5 identifies your network. .8 identifies your broadcast. So basically, there's only 6 and 7 that are actually used. And 6 is used on, it's a virtual IP on that LAN interface for the firewall. And 7 is the IP address of Kali Violet in this case. That's the method that they use, that OffSec use for each one of these for microsegmentation. Each one has their own IP, and each one has their own virtual IP assigned to the firewall's LAN interface as its default gateway. So that there is pretty much its own little quiet little subnet that it has communicating with the firewall that's itself. I understand what the purpose of that people would use microsegmentation for. When I was initially putting together my instructions, I felt it was a little bit of a hassle. Not necessarily not. It's not that I'm saying it's not required. By all means, if this is how it's meant to be deployed, go ahead and deploy it that way. In writing my instructions, I bypassed that. I just left everything in its own in a class C. So I actually have another diagram here. I will minimize this guy, and I'll minimize this one, and I'll bring this one up. This is more of how excuse me, this is the same one. This is more of how I'm doing mine. So there's a couple more differences here that I will actually get to. But the main thing I'm looking at is this, what I call management network. This is the LAN. There is an interface that this firewall has that goes to the LAN. Again, I have these 3 lines. Don't worry about those 3 lines being individual connections. This is just one single line to this box. That's the LAN. Each one of these guys has a separate /24 IP, but it's all in the same subnet. And the management interface, 220.1. They're all using the same gateway. Now, I also have a second, another interface for a separate enclave here. This is not called out. This is not called for by the original instructions. This is a addition that I feel that you would normally find in a normal environment, a SOC environment, where you would have one of 2 things. Either this setup where this is for SOC analyst workstations. For analysts that need to come down, whether they're intrusion detection guys, if they're vulnerability management guys, whatever their role is, to access resources here, they have workstations. Those workstations would be sitting either on their own enclave, or they may be sitting in the same network as the services that they're accessing. So one of those 2, I decided to separate them, and that's one of the differences that I have in my setup, in my network setup at least. So I have I call it my OpNet, my operations network. So I have an OpNet interface on the firewall. I have a management interface on the firewall. I do have the WAN, and I do have a DMZ interface on the firewall. So that's one of the things that I did differently here. Another thing that I did differently, actually if I bring this back up, if we go back to this, we see those 2 Linux machines that I'm not going to build. The victim machine and the analyst/attack machine. That's my interpretation of what that is. Here, the analyst workstations are taking place of that analyst machine. The attack side, I actually have a box up here representing red team. So there's going to be either a machine or maybe even a network of machines. My apologies for that break. My headset turned off. But back into it, the red team here is representative of anything that I would actually do any attacks from. This cloud here that says CDXE Internet, I have an environment I have a couple of routers and whatnot, actually more than a couple, approximately 15 routers, virtual routers, that are all configured to simulate an actual internet. So they're not really internet connected. They are just all connected to each other, doing routing to represent several different routers on the internet. So I have red team connected to this cloud. And then instead of that Kali Perli virtual machine, I have a box here representing a mission partner network, or if you can think of it as a customer network that's actually being monitored and defended. This, and also being a victim, this network has its own connection to that virtual internet as well. So this is one of the things also that I will be doing that's different. Again, the SOC in the box instructions that I'll be running videos through. They won't go into detail too much as to how this network is set up or how the red team is set up or whatnot. I may introduce a virtual machine just to talk about agents, because that is something I will implement. But this is meant to be what is defended and potentially attacked from red team. It is connected to my DMZ, and this is how that data gets in to our SOC. So if I want to, the next thing I want to jump into, again, these are the instructions from Kali Purple, from the Kali Purple folks. I put together my own instructions, and I will include this link as well in the description below. I'm going to jump right over here into my differences. I have a section that literally talks about the differences between my instructions and theirs. So to start with, hypervisor change. Only reason I'm not necessarily changing hypervisors. The original instructions are centered around Proxmox. I understand why Proxmox was actually used. I have no issues with Proxmox, but I already had a virtual environment set up, or a virtual lab, if you will, set up, and my hypervisor that I'm using is VMware vSphere. So that's why I felt it was imperative for me to go ahead and kind of document, okay, since I'm using vSphere, and there are other people out there that may be using vSphere, let's have some instructions for us on how we can actually deploy things. Again, I already had talked about the no microsegmentation in my instructions. Software versions. There are several pieces of software that are part of this deployment, to include Kali Purple itself, that when the instructions from OffSec were put out, to the time I actually started this project, the versions have changed. And the instructions that are given by OffSec aren't really version specific. So when they actually give you commands, they don't target any specific thing. So when it comes to you deploying things and deploying applications and having to configure them, there may be some differences because of the difference in the variance in version number. So what I did was, at least here I documented this first column talks about all, as of the writing of their instructions, what versions there were for each of these pieces of software. And as of the writing of these instructions, what the current versions from each of these vendors are, and then what I decided to go with. The only reason why I decided, if there's any variance, like I believe OpenCTI and Malcolm, the only reason why I did not use the latest and greatest is because when I tried to deploy them, I ran into one issue or another to get it to fully deploy. So I would use the latest that I could get it deployed without any issues. Network architecture revisions, I just touched on that as far as the micro-segmentation, the different LANs and whatnot. One thing I do want to identify is on my diagram, there's two clouds up here, both of them labeled internet. This one over here with all the stars and whatnot, this is the actual internet. This is a fake internet. I only give the actual internet. This is meant to be completely isolated. This actual internet is because of a couple of things. For one, all of the instructions, be it my instructions or OffSec's instructions, they require you to pull software from the internet. So you need to have an internet connection. Ironically, they don't even mention that in the OffSec instructions. You just gotta have to know that. Another thing, we're done with this diagram. Another thing is, if we go to their instructions, again, the way you find the instructions on how to, you scroll through this page, you get a bunch of screenshots. Doesn't really tell you how you start. That's this section up here in the corner. You have identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, and others. These are the nodes that you'll be building. For starters, 500 doesn't have anything in it. Still doesn't as of now. Not worried about it. I'm just highlighting that to let you know. The 1000 series, these are the two VMs that I won't be deploying. So I'm not going to worry about those. My instructions pretty much cover all of these four components here. But one of the things that seemed kind of confusing, this was many members in the community have actually mentioned this. I ran into this when I tried to deploy things. When you take a look at, say, the identify node, your first step is installation. So when we go to installation, if you notice, first thing it's asking you, create a secure server VLAN. Looks like that's in OPNsense. OPNsense is your firewall. You haven't built your firewall yet. So you can't do this. You can't do any of these steps. This is the last step. You can only start here. So your firewall is here, 200. So this is the first node you should build. Then it starts right in Proxmox. You build your virtual machine. Once you get your ISO attached and you boot it, you're going to get into your setup and everything. I'm just skimming through it right now because we'll be walking through this in later videos. But if we look past that, you have your aliases. This is after you've installed OPNsense. Now you can get in there and do aliases. Then you have Elastic Agent. Well, this can't be done because there's a note here. The Kali Purple Elastic Server must be operational at this stage. Well, that happens to be 300. So you have to do this first. Or not first, but second. So what I did was, there's a lot of hopping around there. What I did, if I look at my table of contents here, I believe I have a section that may talk about my order of operations. Yes, right here, 5.1. What I did was I gave an order of here's what order we're going to do things. And what I did also, each one, if we go back to this, each of these nodes, I'm going to just expand these. Each of these nodes, the installation portion of them for identify, detect, and respond, the very first portion is firewall stuff. And many of these nodes, the firewall, identify, respond, there's a portion on them that has Elastic Agent or beats. Those require the detect node to be operational. So what I did was, for the firewall portions of each one of these, I consolidated those steps into the component. I'll just skip right quick to it. So if I'm building the protect node, I consolidated, I'm going to just skip down here to the OPNsense configuration. I consolidated all of the steps that are required to be accomplished for each node in the firewall. That section for each one of them, I put them all into the firewall build portion section. Same thing goes for installing Elastic Beats and FileBeat and anything else that requires the Elastic SIEM to be installed. When I got to building that, they're all incorporated there. So, or actually, no, they're not incorporated there. Once I had made sure that after the firewall is fully set up, the very next node that we build, let me go back to that. The very next node we build is going to be the detect node, which is going to be that SIEM 5. So yes, right here. And once I've built that, now when I build identify, I don't have to touch any, my instructions won't have anything to do with the firewall because it's all taken care of up here. Once I get to the part of my instructions that are installing the, say, the beats, there's a node that's going to be ready to ingest them already, just the logs already that beats will be forwarding. So that I made sure that my instructions had a logical flow and told you do this, then this, then this, because theirs doesn't. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. It doesn't tell you this is what order to do things. You just have to get to a node and it goes, oh, by the way, make sure this is done. Make sure that's done. There are other things that are not included in here, such as the need for internet connection. Yes, you need the access to the internet. Intuitively, because you need access to the internet, that's another reason why you need to do the firewall first. It's what grants everything inside of your SOC enclave access to the internet. So, yeah, that's basically what I was doing there. Another thing that I'm going to be adding is so each of these nodes, the respond, identify, protect, I couldn't get this to go, the Elastic Agent. So they all have an agent that's going to be reporting to the detect node. the SIM stack. Um, I'm also going to be uh, at some point in later videos putting together the victim network or victim slash customer network and installing agents there. Part of my firewall setup is setting up rules to allow for that data to come in. We'll see that when we get into that video. Um, so yeah, that's in a nutshell. Those are the differences between the installation instructions from Offensive Security and the Kali Purple community and what I've actually put together. Again, those links will be in my description below. So the next video that we'll actually be doing, we'll jump right into building that firewall, installing OPNsense, configuring the vSphere virtual machine, and then installing OPNsense and whatnot. One last thing that I actually just realized I forgot to actually mention. Uh, this is a advantage, I would say, that I have using vSphere, not just using vSphere, but also having a enterprise license version of vSphere. vSphere allows, an enterprise license version of vSphere allows for the building of a distributed switch. I mention this because to this day, I don't know of any port mirroring capability, be it physical or virtual, with Proxmox. If you have physical hardware, such as a Cisco switch or whatever switches and whatnot, and you have machines that are on other ports there, you may have the ability to be able to do port mirroring or port spanning, whatever your term you want to use, with that. But in the virtual environment, Proxmox does not have that capability. The vSphere distributed switch does. So this will allow me to do, and as a matter of fact, I'm going to come back here. What vSphere distributed switch will allow me to do, I'm going to come to mine here, come back to this, and key differences. This piece right here. So I remember, you may remember from my previous video where I mentioned that the diagram that is provided by Offensive Security, this guy here, the Kali Eminence, the respond node, is configured with one virtual network interface, just like all the other nodes here behind the firewall. But it has, for those who are familiar with SOC components, with a network monitoring component, you typically would have a sensor that's running certain applications, has certain features to allow it to monitor network traffic. Well, typically those are, if they're hardware devices or even if they're virtual devices, mm, they have, you typically want to have at least two interfaces. One of them is your management interface. That's how you would access the services on that system. That's how it communicates with the rest of the enclave. But it also has a second interface that's usually set up in a monitoring mode. It's sniffing. Usually it's got promiscuous mode enabled and it's connected to a spanned port, a port that is configured to send whatever traffic you want to have monitored to it. And then it will allow it can ingest that traffic and have all the different applications on that system analyze and do whatever they need to do, whether it's the packet just recording it or doing some sort of heuristics or doing some sort of analysis to see what's going on within those packets. All the services that you normally find on a sensor, or many of the services you will find on a sensor, are literally on this respond node, but it's not configured in the original instructions to even listen. It's not configured to do anything but analyze anything that you force feed it. And what I mean by force feed it, the only way you can get the data, the network traffic into it, is to capture it with an external device in a PCAP and then upload the PCAP to it. So, or if you have any files that are need to be analyzed, whatnot, you can upload those files to this. So this is a static, as written by the Kali Purple community. This is a static SOC. It's not live on a network, which I find strange, especially considering they actually have a vulnerable machine that's sitting up there and a attack machine. You can attack the mess out of it. You're not going to see any of that stuff in the SOC as configured with the instructions that they provide, unless you record that data and then upload it into the SOC, and then it can do its magic. So one of the things that I decided I was going to do, this is another change, is I'm actually going to, since deploy a remote sensor, an actual network sensor, at least one. Uh, this will allow me to actively monitor network traffic as it's happening, and then allowing for the sensors to bring that data into my I will call our network analysis node. That's what this respond node is basically. It's a network analysis platform. Um, the sensor will allow me to automatically feed that stuff directly to that network analysis platform, and then have everything kind of, available for a SOC analyst to be able to kind of make heads or tails of what's going on. Getting back to vSphere, that the distributed switch has the capability of port spanning, port mirroring. I can do it multiple different ways. I can span individual network interfaces. I can span VLANs, which is pretty much the method I would actually use, and send them wherever I want to. And what I was going to do is actually deploy a virtual sensor and have it have two interfaces. One of it being a monitor interface, and that's going to be the destination of all of the traffic that I want to monitor. And I want to make sure I did not miss anything here. I believe that is actually it. That was one thing I wanted to make sure I actually pointed out. And the last thing I already mentioned was I was going to go ahead and have the Elastic Agent actually installed on some vulnerable machines, just so we can see some stuff in action. So now this is the end of the video, and the next video will actually dive right in and building that first node, which is that protect node. So it's going to be Byzantium. I will be building that from scratch within vSphere, and then we'll get into the OS installation and the configuration. Again, leave comments below. I know this is kind of went long. The rest of these will be a lot more interesting because we'll actually be seeing on screen the building of everything step by step. Hope to see you guys in the next video.